Welcome back. You know, I've spoken about a lot of different kinds of guns and calibers and all these things, but the thing that delights me the most, that I get the biggest thrill out of, the biggest kick out of, is to go out and bust a bird with my shotgun. The shotgun is probably the most versatile gun that was ever invented. I mean, it can do everything really. I mean, you can't conceal it in your pocket, so it can't supplant the need for a handgun, but it does everything. You know, you can shoot deer with it, you can shoot elk with it with the right loads. Range is becoming extended these days, from squirrels to partridge, quail, pheasant, ducks, geese, turkeys, you name it. This is really, it's got it all. It's a simple mechanism if it's properly understood, but unfortunately there's an awful lot of misinformation and lack of information going around about the shotgun, and people talk about so much about its ballistic effectiveness, but they don't address some of the things which every shotgun shooter really needs to understand about the shotgun. I'm going to be talking about the shotgun in a number of different segments, but what I want to do is I want to cover these various issues one by one, because it's a very, you know, there's a complexity involved with shotguns that goes from one thing to another. So you've got to understand, first of all, the gun itself. You've got to understand the type of chokes that you use, the barrel lengths, the type of stocks that you use. Then you have to move into understanding the different types of shotgun shells, chamberings, payloads, velocities, shot shell sizes, the gauges, and the pellet count, pellet size. All these things are important, but there's so many different aspects to cover that I'm only going to cover today just the mechanics of selecting a shotgun. As much as it appears to be similar to a rifle stock, this is not a rifle stock. This is a rear sight. Let's explain. This right here is the comb of the shotgun. A rifle stock has a comb also, but we really don't. And we talk about whether it's a Monte Carlo or a classic style and all that stuff. But the shotgun's comb is actually its rear sight. And also the angle of the buttstock and where the toe and the heel are positioned in relation to one another is also critical to the sighting arrangement of a shotgun. The thickness of the comb, the thickness of the stock, the thickness of the cheek piece. There's what's called cast off, and which is a bend that you'll find in many shotguns, which changes. In other words, it's no longer linear. The barrel does not point straight down to the toe, I should say to the heel of the stock. So let's address exactly what I mean by that. When you're looking at a shotgun stock, this is the toe, this is the heel, this is the pistol grip, if there is one. This is the flute. This carved out little detail right here, that's called the flute. And this whole section here is called the comb. Now it could be certain trap shotguns over the years have had Monte Carlo combs, which are raised up and inverted so that it allows the shotgun shooter's face to be protected from recoil. The shotgun comes away from the face, but most field shotguns will have a straight comb. The reason why I call it a sight is because a shotgun doesn't have a wing shotgun, unless you're talking about discount for a second, you know, open-sighted and scope-sighted shotguns, which are used for large game. That's a whole different animal. I'm talking about the shotgun in its most common application, which is for delivering payloads of pellets on flying game and running game. Well, all shotguns will have some form of front bead. It's not called a front sight, it's called a front bead. Now it may be a bead like this, it may be an ivory bead, which is now these days I'm sure this is a form of plastic. Ivory is long gone, but it may be a luminous bead, which is a longer you know, a longer tubular thing, but it's still called a front bead. And you know, you may have, if you have a target shotgun, you may have a centrally located bead which is smaller, and that smaller bead assists the eye in properly placing your eyeball along that rib. It quickly aligns your eye on that rib. This is your ventilated rib, and that's a completely optional thing on shotguns. It gives you a more consistent sighting plane. It makes it a little easier for the average eye to pick it up, and it also being ventilated as a number of shots have been fired through it, and as the barrel gets warmer, it disperses heat. It disperses heat patterns from it so that you don't get mirage on top of your barrel, which can distort where your bead is located visually. So it reduces those visual aberrations due to that mirage. Now, and it just gives you a prettier looking gun too. So it's an upgrade which a lot of shotguns are coming with these days. The receiver on, you know, auto loading and pump shotguns will be a elongated receiver, but when you have a over and under or side by side, it can be a monoblock, which is much shorter, which gives you a bonus of having you know, a shorter overall length with the same length barrel. But you know, all those features aside, I want to stick to what the stock is all about. The stock's its only usefulness is to situate your eye along the center of that barrel, precisely behind that bead. And so what you want to be seeing is, you want to be seeing that bead rising on your receiver as if it's the sun just setting on the ocean. In other words, when you place that shotgun up there naturally, and the first thing you see, if it's not that sun rising right on or setting right on the ocean, and it's not just touching it, your shotgun does not fit. I've seen so many times where somebody will walk into a store and they just pick up a shotgun because, you know, they saw some ad where some quick shooting artist, you know, drops, you know, 10 or 12 clay pigeons before they strike the ground, and so that's the shotgun he's got to have because that's the fastest shotgun on the planet and everything. Well, that artist can do that with any shotgun that's an auto-loading shotgun. It wouldn't make any difference. And he could do almost as good with a pump shotgun. He's a shotgun shooting artist, and that has nothing to do with whether that shotgun fits you. It's impossible for any two people to tell the other, you have to buy this shotgun because it's going to fit you. The only way you know if it fits you is to put it up and try it. And you have to do that before you lay your money down, because if you lay your money down and you go out in the field and all of a sudden you can't hit anything because your shotgun is not pointing where you are, then you've wasted your money. It might be an $1,100 gun and you've just wasted your money because you're never going to hit anything with it. What makes a shotgun stock work is that it places your cheek and your shoulder have got to fit this particular animal right here. And they're all made a little different. Every manufacturer out there has slightly different numbers when it comes to length of pull. The length of pull is between the trigger and the center of the buttstock. You can have differences in length of pull that can affect how much you have to pull your head around that stock. It can affect the aim, the pointing, by having a low or a higher cheek piece, or a thinner or a thicker cheek piece. You don't buy these things for appearance. You buy these things for fit. That's the only thing that matters. And you may have a shotgun which has a little bit of what's called cast off. Cast off means that for a right-handed shooter, when you mount the shotgun, the stock bends away. This shotgun has got a slight degree of cast off, probably about 3/8 of an inch cast off, and this is a factory stock. It's a Browning Maxus. Just happens to be a gun. Browning happens to stock most of their guns so that they fit me very well, so that's why I like them. But you know, if a Ithaca fits me real well, which they do, most all Ithaca 37s always fit me through the years, that would be a gun that fits me too. But you know, I had a Frankie shotgun that I couldn't hit a thing with because the shotgun stock simply was too thick in the comb, and it had a high Monte Carlo, and I just simply couldn't hit anything with it. It was my father's bane also. My father gave it to me figuring that maybe I'd do better with it than him, but my father was a competitive trap shooter. He went on tour. But my dad had a hard time dealing with the Frankie because of the way it was conformed. Now Frankie is one of the top end, that's a Mercedes when it comes to shotguns. Wonderful shotguns. But it doesn't make any difference how much money you pay or how little money you pay. If it's a Mossberg and it fits you, it's better than a Frankie that doesn't. So that's the way that goes. The way you determine whether a shotgun fits you is very simple. You close your eyes and you bring the shotgun up until it feels comfortable on your face. Basically, you do that 2 or 3 times, open your eye and see where it is. And do it, you know, you can do that in the store. You don't have to pull the trigger. It has nothing to do with it. Just simply mount the gun repeatedly with your eyes closed, and then open it and see. There are 2 things that you need to, there's only one thing really you need to see correctly. You want to see that bead appear like the sun rising in the middle of this receiver. You don't want to see the receiver because that means you're looking down on it. You don't want to see the barrel because that means you're looking down on it. And you don't want to have to lift your head up to see the bead because that means your comb is too low. And if your bead is, like right now I'm looking down, I've mounted the shotgun so that my comb is too low. I can't get my head down, so I'm looking down on that ramp. If I'm in this situation because the comb is the other way around, too low, now I have to lift my head up in order to see the bead. Why isn't that something I want to do in the field? Because you don't have time. You know what happens is when you're looking at a pheasant taking off and you know he just busted loose here and he's flying at 30 degrees from you, and you have to track that pheasant. He's rising and he's also going sideways. Your eye has no interest in this whatsoever. Your eye is watching that bird. So the whole idea is you want to have a shotgun that while your eye is following the bird, you're going to hit him. You don't want to be trying to track a bead on a bird. It doesn't work that way. I know the magazines and the books will show these illustrations of the bead and the bird and all that. The lead has nothing to do with anything. Those are all generated by nerds that don't know any better. The only thing that makes you a good wing shot is to have a shotgun that fits you, where that bead is right directly on, sitting like a ball right on top of that receiver. No matter what you do, in other words, it's just a very natural thing. That bead will just keep on tracking with your eye. And by having the stock properly configured to your shoulder so that it fits you and the length of your neck, the height of your eyeball, the width of your face, everybody's eyes are situated different. You get close spacing of eyes, you get short necks, long necks, thick necks, so everybody needs to have a different stock configuration. Even this angle right here between the heel and the toe. Frankly, I'm not too crazy about curved butt plates on shotguns. That's what Browning has been doing lately, and FN has been doing with the Winchester line too. They've been putting these curved butt plates. I prefer somewhat more of a square butt plate with a flat butt plate, but that's fine, and it works. So I'm not complaining. But a shotgun is thrown out and in. It's out and in. If you notice, my elbows are not down here and they're not up here. I see some new guys at the trap range, and as soon as I see what they do, I know that they're brand new at this, and they're maybe following the advice of somebody who tells them you got to get those elbows up high so that you push the gun left and right, and you end up like you end up like a statue. You can't track a bird that way. Tracking a bird is a very natural thing. It's just a matter of putting the shotgun up and swinging it up in any direction, and you can track it. And if you notice now, everything has to be fixed from this point up. Everything moves in unison. The shotgun cannot move independent of my body. My body cannot move independent of the shotgun. What you have to learn is to position your elbows basically just naturally at 45 degrees. It gives you good support of the shotgun to push it up and to follow game for tracking birds. And it also allows you to very easily swing the gun from one side to the other without getting your muscles all in a bunch. You don't want to be muscle bound when you're trying to swing a shotgun. It's a very, very natural way. So when you're trying out a shotgun at the store, and don't be looking at people down the other end of the counter, but when you're trying a shotgun at the store, repeatedly bring that shotgun up, and 100% of the time that bead should come right up the way it's supposed to. The only way you'll know is to close your eyes, and then when the shotgun is up and you feel as if you're pointing it comfortably, you open your eye and the bead's got to be there. It can't be almost there. If the bead is just a little bit off to one side, pick up a different shotgun, because that shotgun does not fit you. That gun has got the wrong cast off or the wrong cast on for you. You need to have a shotgun which fits you. Now if you're a southpaw, cast off can be backwards. So that can be something that you can either get a shotgun which is configured for a lefty, or you can have a gunsmith who understands shotguns. They can shim the back here, and they can change that, or they can basically change the angle of the inletting at where it meets the receiver, so that you have the proper cast off for your side. Because you're going to be, if I shoot now from this side, I don't have the correct positioning, because from this side here the shotgun is bent in the wrong direction. So that's the way that works. You want to make sure that your comb fits you. The only way, you don't have to know all the details about the comb, and it makes no difference whatsoever. If you look in the charts, it'll tell you, drop at heel, drop at comb, drop at toe, all those things, but it still has to fit you. And if you have guns that are cataloged from different manufacturers, and you know that one doesn't fit you because it has a particular, say a 1 3/8 inch drop at the heel, and you look at another manufacturer and it has a 1 3/8 inch drop at the heel, and I'm not using specific numbers, but if it has the same number, it's probably not going to fit you either. But that again sometimes has to do with the thickness of the comb, because the thickness of the comb has to do with how your face, your cheekbone is positioned. So as I say, if I pick up this shotgun 100 times, 100 times that bead is going to be right in line. So what you're looking at is exactly what you see down the camera. You're seeing my eyeball, and all you're seeing is my eyeball right behind that bead. And that's exactly what you want to see. You don't want to see it over here where my eyeball is now looking down the left side of the barrel. You don't want to see there where it's looking down the right. You don't want to see here where it's looking down the barrel. And you don't want to see here where I have to poke my head, crane my head to get it up. So that's the important fitting feature of a shotgun with relation to your comb and your eye positioning. Another important thing is to make sure that the shotgun length of pull is perfect for you. The way to do that, and I have a shim in here. This is a shim that you can see right here that allows for a slightly thicker, a 1/16 of an inch thicker length of pull, which is ideal for me, because as it came from the factory, it was just a little bit loose on my shoulder. In order for you to track game properly, a bird properly, you want to be able to have a shotgun which is basically not You don't want to have it loose because it can bobble around. So if you have too short a length of pull, you're going to be trying to, get your head situated. It's got to fit you, and it can't be too long a length of pull, because if it's too long a length of pull, then you're going to be stretching to get around the stock, and you're not going to be positioned correctly. There's an old standard method, and you don't see it written up anymore at all, but this is the standard method for measuring the correct length of pull. So you can just simply put a shotgun in the crook of your arm, and with your finger positioned, with your fist positioned around that pistol grip exactly the way you would to shoot it, with your finger near the trigger. And you don't want to have the chamber shut, but put your finger on that trigger as if you were going to shoot it. It should be sitting nice and comfortably. It shouldn't be falling out because it's too loose. It should be positioned right there in the crook of your arm. I have this slightly loose the way it is. If I were to go out and shoot clothes the way I am right now, I put in a thicker shim, because a thicker shim would give me a better fit. But I shoot this gun, during the fall when I'm wearing heavier clothing, and I'm wearing a thicker vest than this. It's a fluorescent orange vest. It's thicker and everything, so that gives me a little bit more padding here on my shoulder, which brings me out at least another 1/16 of an inch. So those are all things that you have to understand. If you go to the store to try out a shotgun, put on some clothes. Don't try it out wearing your muscle shirt and your t-shirt and all that stuff. And don't, if you have to bring a jacket with you to put on that you're going to be shooting in the field with, do that. Put it on in the store and try the shotgun, because that's the way the shotgun has got to fit you, and it's got to be very, very natural. Now we're going to talk a little bit about chokes now. What is choke exactly? Choke is a constriction of the bore at this end of the barrel. In other words, it is designed to do what, in rough terms, it's designed to do the same thing that a nozzle on your garden hose does. As you tighten up that, if you have one of those old brass nozzles where you have to turn it, it does exactly the same thing. It changes the dispersion of the shot as it comes out the bore. Now you're going to hear various terms. There's cylinder bore, there's improved cylinder, modified, and full, and turkey choke, and things like this. Those are the primary chokes that you'll find on shotguns these days. When they come shipped from the factory, boxed from the factory, most of the time now they contain 3 chokes. Screw-in chokes. If you've got a shotgun tube like this, you've got three screw-in chokes, generally speaking. So you'll have an improved cylinder, and a modified, and a full. Then you can buy other options if you want. You can buy turkey chokes, which are extra full. You can buy dispersing chokes, which will give you a broader pattern. You can buy skeet choke for shooting skeet. You can buy all sorts of things, and you can buy extended tubes, which give you a little bit more gentle constriction at the muzzle. In other words, it's not as abrupt. But that constriction changes the dispersion of the shot. Now, what does that mean? I see sometimes store clerks saying you should buy a shotgun because they're excellent. They disperse patterns, for defensive use and everything. I can guarantee you that anywhere inside the average house, unless you own a mansion where you have 75-foot rooms or something like that, the dispersal of a shotgun at close range is very, very tight. It's with any size choke at all. There is really no dispersion of shot. You're talking about a fist-sized cluster of shot hitting at 12 or 15 feet away. 20 feet away, you still only have a dispersal of no bigger than that. So there is no real dispersion to speak of. But and shotguns, the thing that you see in the old Western movies, you'd see somebody shoot a shotgun at somebody and would take out 3 people at the bar standing, in the saloon, because the pattern just spread out and hit everything. And that's not true either. That's fictitious. That's fantasy. We're still only talking small. We're talking small patterns. But hunting ranges out in the field are different. We're talking about now a partridge or a ruffed grouse that comes up in the New England woods. He's coming up probably, at the base of an apple tree or something like that, and he's only maybe 15 or 20 yards away when he comes up, and your goal is to get him before he gets, 30 yards away, because the next thing is he's going to put an apple tree between you and him. So you got to get your shot off real quick, and it's going to be a close-in shot, so you want to have a wide dispersed pattern. Typically speaking, that's improved cylinder, which is a wider pattern, which will give you it's a significantly wider pattern than you get with, say, modified or full choke, but it's also going to give you a sufficiently dense pattern so that you put 3 or 4 pellets in the bird to bring them down. We're going to talk about the correct loadings for different birds as we go down the line, and different types of game and things like that, so I don't want to get hung up on that stuff right now. But that same dispersion wouldn't work on a rising pheasant that's rising up from 35 yards away. He's already 35 yards away when he comes up out of the cornfield, and by the time you get your bead on him and pull the trigger, he's 45 yards away, and then the pellets are intersecting him, 3 or 4 yards later downrange. So he's getting out to close to 50 yards. You need to have a pattern which is more constricted in order to maintain the same number of pellets in the area where he's being struck. Because as the pellet pattern is dispersed, it gets more sparse. The wider open it is, the same number of pellets, but as farther apart they are in pattern terms, the more sparse the pattern is, the pellet count per square inch on the target. And the farther away they get yet, the lower the velocity and so forth. So the pattern is constantly diminishing as it goes downrange. A shotgun shooter is dealing with basically a shotgun is a short range firearm. There are very few shotgunners that can really expect to hit anything beyond 50 to 55 yards with any reliable success, because by that time not only has the pellet count gone down and the pattern density gone down so much, but also velocity has diminished down to very, very low velocity. Shotgun pellets are sized in different sizes, and we'll talk about the different sizes, but as the pellet sizes go up, in order to penetrate deeper, the shot count per the number of pellets per payload has to go down for the same weight of charge. If you're shooting, for instance, a 1.25 ounce charge, a load of number 6s will have a lot more pellets than a load of number 4s or a load of number 2s, because as the pellet size goes up, the pellet count goes down. So, speaking about choke, how did choke evolve? Well, one of the first types of chokes that was used on shotguns was basically to compress the end of the barrel. In other words, it squeezed the end of the barrel, made it a rather abrupt choke. That was typical for many years, especially with less expensive shotguns. It was an easy type of choke for a manufacturer to put on. Basically, they could put a device on there and turn it right on, and just compress the end of the barrel. As steel shot was developed back in the 70s, late 60s and early 70s, that stuff would get blown out very, very handily with steel shot. It basically would just rupture that choke and take it right out. Most of those old shotguns made in that era were not made to withstand steel shot, and I would never recommend that you use a shotgun that was made back in those days for steel shot for ducks and geese, where it's required for U.S. Fish and Wildlife controlled areas, marshes and all that stuff, wetlands. So stick with the newer shotguns that were made for. Make sure that the manufacturer recommends and states specifically that they're safe for use with steel shot, because otherwise you're just going to ruin an older shotgun. But I digress. Shotguns, also more expensive shotguns, had a machined, basically the bore was machined inside so that the choke was a longer, more gentle constriction and beefier construction, so that it wouldn't just shoot out, and it was also easier on the pellets and didn't deform the pellets quite as much. Now, different types of systems have been used through the years. We haven't always had screw-in chokes. I think wind choke was the first one that came up with that in the about 1960, when I think it was the Model 100 shot, or the Model 50. I'm not sure which shotgun it was. I can't remember that far back. They came out with a nylon tube shotgun with it was basically a steel-lined barrel with nylon on the outside, and I think that was one of the first shotguns that used what they called a wind choke, and that was a screw-in type of choke, which allowed a shotgunner to be able to use the same barrel with many different choke constrictions. Before that, shotgunners really didn't have too many choices. If he had an over and under, he was stuck with whatever he had, top and bottom. Side by side, he had what he had. If he had an auto loader or a pump, many manufacturers offered different barrels. You could get them in different lengths and in different chokes. So it was not uncommon for a shotgunner to have, for instance, I had a Model 37 Ithaca pump, and I had 3 different bird barrels for it, and I had a shotgun slug tube that had open sights mounted on it. And you could actually mount a scope on it if you wanted to. So you had to have different barrels. The other option was that you could have a cuts compensator, which was a type of a threaded-in choke that you could put on the end of basically a gas deflector that would help disperse some of the gases coming out and help ease the recoil. That had short little tubes that you could screw on the end. The cuts compensator was favored by some people. A very popular type of adjustable choke was called the poly choke. And the poly choke company, they made them also with the gas vents in the front, ventilated poly chokes, and they also made them just standard without the ventilation. And the poly choke was very much like the brass hose nozzle on your garden hose. You know, you could open it all the way up to skeet 1 and skeet 2 or cylinder bore, and then you could tighten it all the way up to extra full. If you had the deluxe model, they had an extra full setting on it, and you had click adjustments in between. So it was infinitely adjustable. It was actually a pretty good device. It was a bulbous affair. Wasn't too difficult, but it was, you know, it was mounted on the end. It was silver soldered on the end by the factory. You mailed your shotgun barrel to Ithaca, rather Polychoke, and they would silver solder this on, and for a few extra dollars you could have a Polychoke ventilated rib put on your shotgun too, because a lot of shotguns in those days didn't come with ventilated ribs unless you paid big bucks. So how much did that whole thing cost? In those days, you know, you could get a Polychoke installed at the factory with a ventilated rib for like $29.95, and that sounds like it was a real bargain, but you know, when guys were only making 35 or 40 cents an hour, that was big bucks. So, but that was how people got around and had various chokes in those days. My first shotgun was a 16 gauge Ithaca Model 37 with a Polychoke that my dad previously had owned, and I took my first pheasants with that, and my first squirrels. It was a wonderful shotgun. I was saddened when I learned that my dad wrote me in Vietnam, and he said he upgraded and he got a 12 gauge shotgun. I said, why? I love that gun. It was beautiful, and the old Sweet 16. But it was a great shotgun. Had a combination of lightness and effectiveness on pheasants that was just perfect. And unfortunately, the 16 gauge, I'm getting off track here, the 16 gauge kind of went by the wayside when the 20 gauge 3-inch Magnum came out, because the payload could be approximated to be the same. although the shot column being longer, there was more abrasion of pellets, and so its actual effectiveness probably was not as good as a 16 gauge. But nevertheless, having said that, the 16 gauge is kind of passed into history for the most part, and every now and then somebody brings one out, just like every now and then some rifle maker will bring out a cartridge that hasn't been around a while. If you're looking at this thing here, this wondering what that is, because I'm going to get somebody right, and that's a shell catcher. When I go shooting trap with this, or sporting clays or skeet or something, I put this up, and basically the shell gets trapped in that so that it doesn't hit the other guy in the head, and so I can retrieve the shell for reloading. And if I want, I can take this spring contraption out for when I want to go hunting, and I've just got the mounting plate. So that's what that is. And who makes that? That's a Birchwood Casey shell catcher. It's a very lightweight thing. It's very effective. Never ever worry about a shell bouncing out of the chamber. It just stays right there, and I can pluck it out and stick it in my coat pocket when I'm shooting trap. And it doesn't. Some ranges simply won't allow you to fling shells to the side, because it's naturally. It's not only bothersome, but it's hazardous. Now, these days, most shotguns come with screw-in chokes. That's a wonderful option. That's the most common way of doing it these days. And you have all these different features and ways of working that. You can put in the wide open tubes for skeet shooting. You can put in closer constriction for more woodland hunting, and so forth. So I don't want to talk about choke selection at this time, and I don't want to talk about all the intricacies that has to do with ammo selection, what you buy at the store or what you load at your loading press. And that's something I'll talk about too. I'll bring you over to my mech press, and we'll do some shot shell loading. But I think that's what you basically need to know about shotguns when it comes to the mechanics. As far as the length of barrel is concerned, length of barrel with a shotgun is a rather nebulous thing these days. It used to mean a lot more than it did since smokeless powder came out. In the old black powder days, you had to have a longer barrel in order to get higher velocity. So a guy who was going out in the marsh, going goose and duck hunting, needed to have a 32-inch barrel in order to have sufficient velocity. But that's less important these days. What's the most important and most significant part of a shotgun barrel length has to do with its balance and its ability to swing. And it's basically its sighting plane, which is less important. A trap shooter who wants to make sure that he's able to track birds which are constantly diminishing in distance, they're constantly getting farther out, and eventually they start to descend. Once they start to descend, it's way out too far, and his pellets will never reach that bird. But he needs to be able to track that bird as it's basically getting out there quickly, and he's seeking to have a kind of a pinpoint patterning. Well, he wants to have a 30 or 32-inch long trap barrel. Some guys even have longer ones. And not only that, but it allows him to swing and keep that barrel moving, because that's all important. And he doesn't want to have a gun that swings too fast, because basically it will swing right off target, because as he's accelerating his swing, he'll find that he's getting way out ahead of the bird. So it's a good balance to have a barrel which has got good length to accelerate through the bird and to follow through and pass the bird. And we'll talk about how you shoot shotgun targets and how you bring down birds, especially when they're tracking left to right or right to left. That's a different creature altogether than one that's going straight away. So having that longer barrel is great for balance, and it also does keep the velocity up. But velocity is not as important with a shotgun with modern day powders, because for the most part the velocity is going to be about the same no matter what barrel length you put on it, within very, very tight degrees. The other thing is that the other end of the scale is a person who's going out into the woods where, you know, naturally there's branches all around, and, you know, you're coming through pine boughs and things. To have that long tube can get to be a nuisance. So the person who's out in a duck blind, who's able to, you know, basically mount his gun and wait for those ducks to come in, or the geese to come in, you know, he's basically positioned himself. He can have any length of barrel he wants because he's shooting over decoys. That guy and the trap shooter, they want the longer barrels to be able to, you know, basically pinpoint their target. But the guy who's going out partridge shooting in the woods, he wants to have a quick gun that comes up. Speed is all important. You've got to get up real fast, and anything that inhibits that speed means precious tenths of a second, and precious tenths of a second, that bird's gone a long ways. So, you know, you got to. The only thing that's important with a shotgun in the woods is speed. You got to get that gun mounted quickly, pop it onto the bird. As soon as that bead crosses that bird, you snap the trigger, and that's the only way you bring down a partridge. And I can guarantee you, of all the things I've ever hunted in my life, different birds and ducks and geese and, you know, antelope and elk and deer and all that stuff, the hardest thing of all, to this day, the most difficult target of all, is a stinking rough grouse out here in the New England woods. There's something about them. They're uncanny about their ability to be able to get a tree between you and that shot pattern. So that is the wily. You know, they call him the king of the forest. You know, he's really to get a partridge down on the ground is no small task. You know, probably my batting average on them is about 200. That's about it. So they're tough. So speed is all important. So 26-inch barrel is very common for 26-inch barrel is very common for a partridge gun, for a woodland gun, for what's called an upland gun. That's upland game being woodland. That's typical, and for quail, nothing's better than a 26-inch shotgun. 28-inch is very typical for a pheasant gun. You need to have that balance between having ability to mount it quickly and get on target, and to have you know, a little bit longer sighting plane so that you can more accurately point that shotgun. And it also, you have to have that extra weight because it flows through the target as that pheasant is coming up. Your buddy might have flushed him over here and he's coming across your path, and naturally we're never shooting across his. Everybody has their own shooting lanes, and you set that up before you even go into the field. But when that bird flies into your shooting lane, all of a sudden now you're tracking a bird which is flying perpendicular or maybe at an angle. So you need to have a shotgun which is a little bit longer than a 26-inch gun in order to track that bird and to follow through. And that's so important with shotguns. So we'll talk about how shotguns are followed through and all that stuff too as we go on. So remember that when you're buying a shotgun from the manufacturer these days, you really don't have to worry too much about you know, what choke to buy. The only thing that you really have to concern you, because we're going to come with the different multiple choke tubes. The only thing that's really important is make sure that it fits you perfectly. Perfect is the only way. It can't be almost perfectly. It's got to be. That bead has got to come up right in the middle, just like the rising sun. And if it comes up too far, it's too high, and if it doesn't come up far enough, it's too low, and if it comes up left or right of center, it's off kilter. And so don't buy that shotgun. I don't care what your buddy tells you, and I don't care what some manufacturer tells you, or what the dealer is trying to stuff down your throat. Don't buy it. It's just not. You're not going to ever hit anything with it. You can't adjust yourself while the bird's flying. It doesn't work. We're gonna talk about all those things, but the most important thing is to select a barrel length which will give you the best position behind the bird that you're going out hunting. So if you're a woodland hunter, you want a shorter barrel. 26-inch barrel is fine. Don't get too short a barrel. You know, riot shotgun barrels are just no good. You know, and I don't care. You know, pistol grip shotguns don't work for this either. Pistol grip foreruns don't work for this either. if you want to have some tactical shotgun for, for going down to the range and busting silhouette targets or something, have at it. But that's not a wing shooter shotgun. You're never going to hit anything with it. Whether you should have a pistol grip or not is, for the most part, I would recommend, unless you're an expert gunner, unless you've been shooting shotguns all your life and you are an instinctively good shot, I would stay away from a straight grip. As cool as they look, I would stay away from a straight gripped shotgun. That was something that was developed years ago by the British and the Scottish for upland shooting, and it reduces the weight by an ounce and a half or so. It gives the gun a little bit more trim feel, but it alters your natural positioning when you bring the shotgun up, because your hand does not want to go this way. It does not, and that can induce all kinds of fussy little things in your pointing which can throw you off target. You want to, for the most part, check out what feels comfortable to you. Take note of that. Does your pistol grip feel comfortable for the way your wrist naturally falls? You shouldn't have any issues with a shotgun. You cannot conform yourself to the shotgun. The shotgun has to conform itself to you. Period. That's all there is to it. We'll talk about how you use a shotgun, and I've spoken about this in an earlier video, but you point a shotgun. You don't aim a shotgun. You never, the guy who was the most difficult situation, when I came home from Vietnam, I had been shooting rifles so much that I could not get back into the trap. I could not get back into trap shooting. It took me a long time. I was having a very difficult time. I couldn't hit one bird out of 25 because I had instinctively picked up the habit of aiming. And when you start aiming a shotgun, trying to aim at a bird flying away, you'll never, ever, ever, ever hit it. It's impossible. You're always going to be behind the bird, and you're always going to be below the bird, because the bird's going to be rising up out of your sight picture as you squeeze it off. Because a shotgun doesn't work that way. You have to point it and just slap the trigger. And we'll talk about all those different finer points as we go on. So when you're picking out a shotgun, assess what you're going to be doing. If you're going to be sitting in a duck blind like Duck Dynasty guys and shooting from a blind, you can have a long tube, gives you a good long sighting plane, and you can have a heavily stocked gun that you can mount, and that's good. It still has to fit you though. If you have a shotgun that you're going to be carrying around all day long in the middle of a cornfield, it's heavy. You're going to be carrying all your pheasants in the back of your coat by the middle of the day and all those things. You don't want to be slugging around a heavy goose gun. You don't want to be slugging around a gun which is chambered for long chambers and things. You want to have a gun which is manageable through the day. So maybe a 28-inch barrel is good for that. If you're going out upland hunting into the woods, now you need to have a 26-inch barrel. Those are the important considerations. Then you can fine-tune things later on. If you're a turkey gunner, that's another thing. Turkey shotguns tend to be a little bit more specialized because they're usually shooting heavier payloads. The last consideration in purchasing a shotgun should be the chambering. Now this one here, before I misspeak, because I've had so many shotguns through the years, and I got this one because I've had rotator cuff tears in my life, and so recoil has become an issue for me. So this happens to be a 3-inch, 26-inch barrel. Now this because I use this a lot I use this primarily for bird hunting. What we call bird hunting. That's upland game. So I like to have a short 26-inch barrel on a gun like this, and it gets by very nicely for being out in a cornfield someplace when I'm pheasant hunting, because this longer receiver here, it means that the shotgun's overall length is pretty well balanced for longer shots too. So I get a good sighting plane. But a 26-inch barrel in a over and under or a side by side is much, much shorter overall length. The gun's only going to be this long. So a lot of guys will get a 28-inch barrel with an over and under or a side by side and have the same balance as they would have with a 26-inch barrel. So remember that. Those are keys. And so you can have a, you can have a, with an over and under or a side by side, you can have a gun that's very well suited for long cornfield shots or short upland wing shots. The length of the chamber, you'll see with different manufacturers. This one here happens to be a 3-inch, 2 3/4 inch to 3-inch chamber. I hardly ever, I haven't shot a 3-inch shell in there yet. I probably have no need for ever shooting a 3-inch shell in that thing. 2 3/4 inch shells with lead shot is more than adequate for, more than enough pellets out there for anything that I hunt. So, and it's also, it has the benefit of being able to cycle target loads. You got to be very careful of that, because quite frequently guys will buy a they'll buy a shotgun that has the larger chamber, and they fail to take note as to whether that gun will cycle. If it's an auto loader, if it's a pump, it doesn't matter. But if it's an auto loader requires a certain amount of gas flow through the holes up here in order to cycle the action correctly. And light target load, 1 1/8 ounce shot target loads for a 12-gauge shotgun won't cycle a Magnum shotgun. It simply won't do it. So you'll end up with a shell firing, but it won't cycle the action to expel that empty shell, and it won't cycle the next round in. So if you're interested in doing any kind of clay target shooting for fun, if you've never shot a shotgun much, you got to get yourself, the thing that goes right with this thing here is you got to have clay pigeons. Whether you can go down to your local sporting club, your fishing game club, or whether you can buy yourself a Trias trap or something like that and a couple of cases of clay pigeons, you've got to get some time in behind those clay pigeons. And if you can't shoot clay pigeon with standard target loads, in other words, standard 1 1/8 loads, you're going to be handicapped. You can't be using expensive high velocity, game loads for target shooting, for practicing, because it's not only expensive, but the recoil is way too much. And a lightweight field load is the same as a target load. So you can't miss out on that shooting opportunity, that practice time behind the clay pigeons. So get yourself a shotgun that will absolutely handle clay pigeons. This one will. I wouldn't buy a shotgun that I can't shoot clay pigeons with maybe the exception of just if I was living down on the seacoast still and I wanted to go out duck hunting, I'd have a dedicated duck gun that I use for nothing but steel shot, and it would have full Magnum chambers and everything. But that's not what I'm doing with this shotgun. I want to be able to do everything with this. So the most important thing is I want to be able to shoot lightweight field loads and lightweight target loads. So I think I've covered all the primary basics about the shotgun and what you should be looking for when you go and buy it. As far as the fit and finish goes and everything, that's all up to you. But the most important thing is it's got to fit you. The fit to your shoulder is all important. It's 100% important. So thanks for watching, and stay tuned. I'm going to have more on the shotgun and all the different things to do with the loads put behind it, and how to make your own shot shells if you want. So thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and tell your friends about us. God bless.